Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining me from. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to be with me this morning. I'm happy to spend the time about an hour with you today to discuss with you what feature-based project management means. My name is Magdy Hanna. I am the Chief Technical Officer of Rommana Software. This webinar is being hosted by Rommana Software, the leader in integrated application lifecycle management. You can visit us at rommanasoftware.com and you can get a free trial of the Rommana ALM package for about 60 days for up to 3 members. And if you need to extend the free trial, just let our team know and we'll extend the free trial for you. For now, I'm going to start my webinar. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to click on the questions tab and put your question there. I will be peeking into the questions area throughout the webinar to answer your question. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available at the Rommana website sometime next week. All right, let's get started. Just to start, I just want to tell you that when I use the word feature in this webinar, I mean either a requirement or a user story or whatever other format you write your features in, okay, depending on the methodology being used in your project, right? So feature is a generic term to mean something you'd like the system to do or you expect the system to do. All right. With that being said, let's talk about why we need to focus on features in our projects. I don't think you need me to spend too much time with this. If you think about any project, not only software projects, but any project you might be doing in your home, bringing a contractor to do work for you in your home. The feature, the thing that's supposed to be delivered, is the most critical thing in the project. Absolutely. Everything I am saying in this slide applies not only to software projects, but to any project of any type. The customer cares about features. The most things they care about is features, what they're getting, but also when they are getting it, right? When we have features in software, they need to be designed, they need to be coded, they need to be tested. There might be other tasks, I'm going to call them tasks, that must be done to each one of the features. Absolutely, any feature, whether it is, again, a software feature or something else. When I say something else here, let's assume that you're bringing a contractor to build a pool in the backyard of your house, right? You can change your features anytime. You can go back and say, instead of having 4 lights in the pool, I'm going to have 6 lights. Or instead of having the lights to be in this side, I want them to be in this side. So features change over time. This is my last bullet here. Interestingly enough, as you know, when features change, the changes impact other features. So you may have to adjust some other features. When customers change their mind about a feature, which they do very often, then we need to go back and find out the impact of that change on other features. But not only that, but the impact of that change on the schedule. Features have risks associated with them. And the risks here I'm talking about are what I refer to as project-related risks, meaning that what are the possible risks that could possibly hinder us from delivering the feature that the customer wanted. Whether the risks have to do with the ability to implement the feature or the ability to deliver the feature on time, or anything else that could happen that will hinder us or delay us from delivering the feature. Risks might be a result of dependency on other third-party components or software or whatever. As I said, features will affect your project timeline. I don't think I need to spend any time with that. I hope you are convinced that if we are going to manage our projects, we need to focus so much on the features we are delivering to our customers. Now, if you look at this picture, I put feature in the center of attention here, and around it, everything else that need to be managed in relationship to features. So, for example, we have to have all these things that is relating to testing that are associated with the feature. When we have a feature, we have to develop scenarios, or we have to develop acceptance criteria. We have to write test cases. We have to write test scripts. And eventually, we write bug reports. That's if the test case fails. If we look at a feature from a development perspective, there are database tables that are related to the specific feature, or at least there are certain database tables. If we make changes to them, they will affect the features. Or we have design documents, we have acceptance criteria also. That's the same here as the acceptance criteria and the testing side, and so on. The screen layout, a feature has a screen layout, a screen design. If you look at a feature from project management, they have effort estimate, time estimate, they have risks, they have tasks, milestones, the progress, and so on. And other things that I could not fit into project management or testing or development. On the left-hand side here, when we have a feature, we might have to develop use cases. We may also have design models or other related features, because features relate to each other. We have documents, we have functional components that those features relate to, and so on. There is so much stuff. Now, of course, someone might say, where did you come up with all these things? We just write features. Well, that's why Rommana ALM, as a full application lifecycle management, allows you to keep track of all these things when they are relating to features. So I'm actually getting those from Rommana ALM, from the project management component. The feature-based project management has been implemented in Rommana ALM for so many years now. It's very unique, very unique. We pride ourselves with the fact that no other software or project management tool implements feature-based project management. All right, so what does it mean to manage our projects with the features in mind, with the focus on features? Of course, we need to implement features, then we need to allocate those features to project resources and people with certain responsibilities. Some people are going to design the user interface for the features. Some people are going to build the database for the features. Some people are going to test those features, and so on. And we also need to create the tasks to perform with these activities. Of course, all this will become obvious when I start showing you how Rommana ALM does all that. We need to create estimates for each one of the tasks, how much time we need in order to build the feature, how much time we need in order to test it, and so on. We need to know if there's any specific risks that has to do with the features, and we need to think about that. We have to have our project timeline, as we're going to see in a little bit, how the project timeline is done feature by feature. All right, I'm going to go further and give you what I call the minimal project management practice. The minimal that any project must be doing, whether you are doing feature-based or not. And what I'm referring to here is this. For any project, you would have a list of tasks. A list of tasks, and you have an estimated number of hours. This is very simple. So you can imagine the contractor you bring to your house to do work in your house. He or she is not going to start your project without knowing what are the different tasks and how many hours each task will take. That's the only way for that project manager or contractor to know how much is the total cost or how much is the total time for this project. So simply a list of tasks and how many hours each one of those tasks take. And I'm going to ask you now, how many of you would say, yes, in our project management practice, we do that. We keep track of the tasks and the estimated number of hours. I have not yet even spoken about the actual number of hours spent. And of course, if you're going to keep track of the actual number of hours, you can calculate what I call the percentage of deviation from the estimated. So if you estimated 10 hours for a given task, but you spend 2 hours, then 12 hours, then you underestimated your task by 20%. If you estimate 10 hours and you end up by spending only 8 hours, then you overestimated your feature by 25%, because 2 hours is 25% of the 8 hours you spent. Okay, so how many of you would say, yes, absolutely yes, my project manager or myself, when we manage our projects, we do that? So far, only one person. Now I got 3. But that's about 2% of people saying that our projects is doing those minimal practices. So what are we going to do with the rest of the practices, which have to do with feature-based project management? This practice here has nothing to do with features. As you can tell, it's all about tasks and how much time each task will take. Now, this is a little bit more advanced practice, not too advanced. This is simply, we're estimating the hours, but breaking it down by task and the feature. So now this is saying how much time do we need to implement each one of the features. And that is very critical. That is very critical, because I can see that this requirement or this feature number 117 is going to take 104 hours. This is going to take 243 hours, and so on. And the total now of the 3 features, I only put 3 features because I want to fit something on one slide. The total for these 3 features is 800 hours. What if the customer comes back and says 800 hours, how many days are those? I don't have that much time. Then what do? We're not going to be able to say, well, then we don't have to do testing. Then we have to cut down on the final testing here. We can do 100, we can do only 50 hours. Well, testing is testing. If you estimated that you need 120 hours, you need 120 hours. If you estimated here 15 hours to do the testing for this feature, that's what it is. So you cannot cut down on the time for tests, but what you could do is to remove a whole feature. Now, I'm not talking about a project that has 3 features or 3 user stories. I'm talking about a project that might have much more than that. And of course, as you see, also the actual number of hours here. Please don't get bothered by the percentages. I don't want anyone to say, oh, how come is it that design is taking 75 hours, but testing is only 45 hours, or coding is taking 90 hours. And when I put those numbers, I did not pull them from an actual project. I just made up the numbers. Okay. All right. I guess I need to ask the same question. How many of you would say, yes, our project keeps track of the time estimates, at least by feature, which means for each feature, they know the total number of hours. So the 104 here and the 243 here. How many of you would say yes? If that's the case, please go ahead and raise your hand. Got 2 people out of the 3 people who raised their hands on the first practice. At least we have some consistency here, right? Honestly, I'm going to have to wonder how you manage projects. And of course, many of you are in Agile projects. And sometimes Agile people come and say, well, in Agile projects, we don't keep track of these things. Well, too bad then. If Agile is gonna make us have sloppy project management practices, then that's too bad. Someone is saying it is very impossible with Agile. I run Agile projects every day. I understand. In a very informal Agile project, a team member will pull out a user story and start working on it. But doesn't it make sense for the team member to say, okay, I'm going to do this user story and I think it's going to take 8 hours. I understand that the user story is brief. That's why some people say it's hard to estimate. Well, if the user story is too brief to the point that we cannot estimate, well, that's not good then, because we are getting to build the user story in a very unknown environment. So I am assuming we've taken some time to dissect the user story, to understand more about it. And if you listen to my webinars on scenario-based development and testing, you'll see that I always recommend that we build scenarios for user stories. And that scenarios are ways of breaking it down, the user story, to help us understand the amount of work involved in the implementation or the building of the user story. Let's move to the next practice then, which is the same practice, but it has further 2 columns here I added. See, this is the original practice here, and this I added 2 more columns here. And now this gets into the cost, not only the time, but the cost. And if this is not important for your project, then you don't have to worry about it. The cost estimate becomes important and very critical for contracting companies that hire people to do your features or your projects, and they need to know how much time to charge you for specific features. This number here is coming by multiplying the estimated number of hours times the hourly rate of the person who is going to implement that feature, that task. Now let's move on. This practice is about who is doing what in the project. These are the features on the left, and these are the different tasks. And we just need to know who is doing this task for this feature, who's doing this task for this feature. Now, sometimes in an Agile project, you've got analysis, design, and the coding is all done by one person, which is fine. And hopefully testing is done by a different person. It's going to be here. So maybe if we are an Agile team of 5-6 people, maybe we know it by heart. And because Agile teams do not go more than 5 or 7 people, maybe we don't have to document anything. But now, if you have a non-Agile project or even an Agile project using scaled Agile methodology, you can easily have multiple teams totaling 100 people, a couple hundred people. The next practice, the duration of each task. Start and end date. All right. Now, this is how a timeline should look like if you're doing feature-based project management. On the left, you have all the features, all your user stories or all your requirements. On the right, you've got your timeline, but the timeline is broken down by tasks. So for this feature, we're going to do prototyping from this date to this date. And we're going to start writing code from this date to whatever date. But at the same time of the prototyping for this feature, we are going to have a meeting with the customer to present to them part of the prototypes. But the prototyping is going to continue. This is a timeline by feature by tasks. And by the way, this picture here is taken from an actual timeline report from the Rommana ALM software. When you see the timeline in Rommana ALM, in the actual software, you'll see much more information than what you're seeing on the static picture, because you can click on on the task and get more details about the task. You can click on the requirement and get more details about the requirements and so on. And you can see who's doing the specific task and how much time they estimated and how much and so on. Because remember, the duration is one thing, but the actual time estimate is a different thing. Okay, this does not mean that we're going to be taking 4 days times 8 hours. That's 32 hours. No, we might be doing just 4 hours a day, but we're doing other things. So the time estimates does not line up exactly with the duration. You know that. Of course, if you're using Microsoft Project does not do that. If you're using Jira, I am not sure if Jira allows you to do such a thing easily. Another practice, I wish actually to label this as a minimal practice as well. Why? Because it tells us for each user story or each requirement or each feature, how many tests have we written? I know I have a lot of data here, but go ahead and just consider the first 2 columns. How many tests did we write for each one of these, for each one of those features? Okay, and out of that 87 test cases we have written for this requirement, how many of them passed, how many of them failed, and how many of them have not been executed yet? I'm going to say the absolute minimal practice is the first 2 columns. How many of you would say, yes, we're keeping track of the number of test cases for each feature or user story or requirement? Please go ahead and raise your hand. And this has nothing to do with Agile or non-Agile. I mean, at any point of time, if someone says, how many tests did you do for this user story? You should have an answer. Okay, 2 people. Now, how many of you say, yes, and we also keep track of how many passed, how many failed, and how many have not been executed yet? Because that's critical. Because the ones that failed, we know we have 3 bug reports to worry about for this feature. We know now we have only 55 out of the 87 passed. So if we were to speak about what I call the percentage of readiness, how ready this feature is for release. So if I take the 55, divide them by the 87, it gives me 63% ready to release. Because I still have about 32 test cases between fail and not executed yet. Now, of course, any one of you can look at this as, is this too much? No, if you're using a decent tool that allows you to do these calculations, that's not too much. So back to the practice. Total number of test cases, how many passed, how many failed, and how many have been executed yet. And based on that, you can calculate this number, the readiness, the percentage of readiness, and you can also calculate the percentage of completeness, but that's based on what? Everything you executed, the 55 plus the 3. So now if you take the 58, divide them by the 87, it gives you a bit higher percentage than 63. So you could possibly have a user story or a feature or requirement like 225 here, and you're 100% complete because you actually have executed all the 45 test cases. You see that? 40 of them passed, 5 of them failed. Because you executed all the 45, you're 100% complete. The testing for the first cycle is 100% complete. But the percentage of readiness is not 100% yet, simply because of those 5 that failed. So the 88.89% is coming from the 40 test cases by the 45. Now, there is still some remaining of stuff of the practice. If you attend my courses, you'll hear me talking about exploratory testing. Last week, I gave a presentation on exploratory testing and how you integrate exploratory testing into a disciplined software testing process. So, and at the time, during that webinar, I said, you've got to keep track of the number of exploratory tests you did. Why? Because you want to make sure to kind of get credit for those. So here I am saying the 87 test cases 65% were pre-designed test cases, whether you call them scripted test cases or whatever, but 22 of them are exploratory. And of course, I elaborated on the webinar last week on why we need to keep track of the 22. You can go back and listen to the webinar. In fact, the recording is being finalized today and should be posted on the website for the International Institute for Software Testing today. All right. Also, if your tested process is disciplined enough, you should know how many positive testing you did and how many negative testing you did. And here they are. If this is too much for you, if this is too much discipline, just stay with the minimal practice. What you see in front of you is really the picture that describes all the components of Rommana ALM. So please feel free to check out if you do not need to see how Rommana ALM does that, or does those practices that I spoke about. So these are all the components. You got your Rommana repository in the middle, and that's simply a SQL Server. You got all the test management activities here. You have all the requirements and the user stories and the change management. Everything is here. You get all the feature-based project management here. Of course, as you can see, all those components are connected through the repository. So when you see Rommana ALM now, it's going to be simply one user interface. So that's why I say full integration means that one user interface and one repository. All the collaboration here, the reviews of the requirement, the approval of the requirements, the approval of the documents and things like that's here. If your project is going to do use cases, then you can manage the use cases here. We also have document management, whether those documents are related to requirements or anything else, and the test management is here. So Rommana ALM also integrates with those tools to allow you to do other things, although Rommana ALM has its own issue management component, but you can maintain your issues or your bug reports either in Jira or Bugzilla. You can also do your test automation using unified functional testing from HP. You can maintain your code in Subversion SVN. So these are the different components of Rommana ALM. Okay. So when I start, I got what we call the portfolio screen, which has all the projects that I am part of, or this login name is part of. On the left here, I have all the products or systems or subsystems, and I have here Rommana ALM as just one of the systems or one of the products that I am managing within this installation of Rommana ALM. And so you can tell we used Rommana ALM to manage the projects of Rommana ALM. So I'm going to start, I can start this project. When you start a project, you get this screen here. It's called the project activities. It gives you everything you need to do with the projects here on one screen. There's also this dashboard that gives you a lot of details about what's going on with the project. Any decent tool should give you a dashboard like that. So, and you can customize this dashboard any way you want. You can configure it. Here you can add and remove controls. So in the center here, you got some charts. This is test execution by status. You can, of course, change it anyway. If I scroll down to the right here, that's issue by status, and so on. I'm sure if you've used the tools that gives you a dashboard, I'm going to call it dynamic dashboard as opposed to static dashboard. So you can see everything there. So on the left, you've got some widget here that are like tables. So these are opened issues. These here I have list projected tasks and so on. The nice thing about this dashboard is that everything is clickable. So which means I have here 136 issues that are critical. I have 53, and if I click on any one of those, so for example, if I want to see, let me go back to the previous chart. I have issues by status. We closed 162, but we still have 19 open. If I want to see the 19 that are open, all what I have to do is to click on this. Now it gives me the 19 issues that are still open here. And again, it's all the reports within Rommana ALM are like that. They're clickable. So so that's the issue number right here. If I'm curious about any one of those issues, I can click on this. I can get the details of the issues. All right. So because this is not an Agile project, I have requirements. If this was an Agile project, this would have been a user stories. So the menu changes depending on the methodology you choose. So here are my requirements. Here are my functional requirements. Here are my quality requirements, and so on, and all other kind of requirements. And as you can imagine, requirements exist in hierarchy of details like that. So there are requirements, there are sub-requirements. The same is true about user stories and so on. If I were to click on any requirement here, it gives me the details of the requirement. Here is the description of the requirement. Here are all the things that are related to the requirements. There are scenarios, there are risks, it has some issues, and so on. I think the best way to show you the feature-based project management is to go to reports. And reports are broken down by area of the tool. So project management reports are here. Here, cost estimation by requirement or by feature. So I'm going to display the report. I could filter, as you can see, by release or by sprint. So now, if the report looks like this, requirement on the left, this is the same spreadsheet I showed you. These are the different tasks and estimated number of hours, the actual number of hours, estimated cost, and so on. This is the same thing I showed you. But the nice thing about the report is I can click here to see the details of the requirement. I'm going to close it again. I can click here on any one of the tasks to see the details of the task. Very simple. And here's the task. I don't have a task description because it's a prototyping, but I can see who's doing it and so on, and the task creation date and the estimated number of hours for that task and the actual number of hours and so on. All right. So as I said, everything is clickable. So I'm going to close this report here and go back to these reports. Estimation by task. That's different. That's kind of the pivot of the one we're looking at. Now, in this report, the tasks are here and the features are here. You see that? So this says how much time are we estimating for development and for testing by developers and for whatever across all features. And again, it's estimated actual, estimated cost, and so on. But that is task broken down by features. I'm going to just show you a couple more. Let me show you the project timeline. As I told you, this is the same report I've taken a picture of and put for you on the presentation. Of course, the report is being composed on the fly, so it takes a bit of time, but it's ready now. And as I said, here are the different requirements or features or user stories on the left. If I just move the mouse over the requirements here, it gives me some parameters of the requirement, some characteristics, some attributes. I can click on it to move me to the requirement screen. I already did that. Here is the timeline by dates, the tasks. If I put the cursor here, it gives me some details about the task, but I can also click on it. It gives me much more details. So this is the timeline, and I can change this anytime. So I can click here on the task and the change. So it says, do you want to edit the name or see other properties? I'm going to say I'm going to see other properties and continue. So I can change the duration of the task, and I can change the estimated number of hours and so on. So it tells me here, this task is for this requirement group. It's a little bit more details than what I wanted to show you in this brief thing. So here, if I clicked on this, it tells me that I have 3 people participating in this task. And here is the estimated number of hours for each one of them and so on. All right. Thanks for taking the time to be with me today.